Welcome to House of Horns. My name is Victor Corona, aka Victor Producer, and joining me as always is NFL staff writer for Sports Illustrated, Gilbert Manzano. Gilbert, we have a jam-packed show, but I don't want to keep the people waiting because we have a great guest on. So I want to make sure we get him on right away. So
Yeah,
instead of me, babbling on and asking you a dumb question like I always do, I'm gonna set the floor here for you.
I gotta say it's gonna be hard to follow that, Victor, because I felt the energy in your voice. You're hyped for this episode here of House of Horns to discuss the 2024 draft class for the Los Angeles Rams, and we're not alone. And this is where I get excited. I get hyped. This is my good friend from the LA Times, Gary Klein. He is one of the best in the business, one of the nicest guys I know. And also, quick side story before I introduce Gary Klein here on the program. Gary got a haircut recently, and I recommended him to my barber in Pasadena. Going to a
Oh.
Mexican barber shop. So I love that from Gary. But Gary, without further ado, let's introduce our guy here, Gary Klein of the LA Times, Rams beat reporter. Gary, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for that recommendation, Gilbert.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but how did it go for you being at a barber shop primarily and speaking Spanish and all that?
Oh, it was fantastic. I have someone who's cut my hair for about 30 years, and she was out of town, and I really needed a haircut. So you really came through. And Saul and the guys at that barbershop were terrific. And it was great to be in an environment with all the conversation you can imagine going on in a barbershop. Some of it in Spanish, which I was able to pick up with my the Spanish I learned in school and whatnot. But it really was a good time. And thanks very much.
No problem, Gary. Honestly, I was telling Victor and I was telling Fernando, I'm like, Gary hit me up about getting a barber in Pasadena, and I told him, no way he's gonna go. I don't think he's gonna try. But sure enough, the next day you walked in, got a haircut. You're still looking good, so I appreciate that for taking me up on the recommendation. You trusted me. That's a big thing for me, Gary. So I'm glad that it worked out for you.
Well, maybe I'll start a new trend, because when I asked Saul, I said, when was the last time you did a flat top? And he said, I said, do you think it's coming back into style? He said, I don't think so. And I said, well, I'm in your hands.
It's funny. I don't want to keep going on this, Gary, but Saul, he's an older gentleman. He's been cutting hair for a long time. He cut my hair since I was like 17, 18. So he's seen different styles throughout the years. So I'm glad you guys have a conversation about that, Gary. But to shift over to the Rams here, and I got to ask you, because you've been covering the Rams since they moved back to LA in 2016. The last time they had a first-round pick, a guy named Jared Goff in 2016. And then all those years of having Thursday off for first round, the NFL draft, was it a little weird to work on a Thursday opening night of the draft?
It really was. And I have to tell you, I kept thinking, okay, Les Snead is going to trade back out of the first round to keep the streak alive and allow maybe someone to have a beverage at the end of the night rather than having to write the story. But he stayed in the first round. And it really was strange. I mean, I was there in 2016, actually in Chicago when they selected Goff. And as you mentioned, until last week, I had not been working on a Thursday night for a long time.
Yeah, it must have been really weird for you, Gary. And I was thinking the same thing, some kind of trade, either trading out or trading up. And, they were there at number 19. But before we ask you some serious questions here about the NFL draft, Victor will handle that. But I'm just curious about the draft house in Hermosa Beach. How was that for you guys? And you've done it for the last couple of years, right? But does it get better every year for the draft house for the Rams?
Well, I think that, I have to give the Rams some credit. They've been very creative in the way that they've handled the draft. They were in Malibu, several years ago. They were in the Hollywood Hills. They were in the San Fernando Valley, and now they were down in the South Bay in Hermosa Beach. And they tied it into an event they actually did on the beach, which I think was very successful for them until the wind shut it down on the second day. But it really is a different kind of environment. I think beat writers in other cities that don't have this opportunity to really mingle with the coaches and the scouts during most of the time when they're not actually on the clock, it's invaluable, I think, for the reporters just to get to know the people they're covering in a setting that isn't so sterile like it is usually out at the facility. So it was, I give it high marks.
Yeah, Gary, I wanted to ask you just before I ask you anything about football related. How was it, that 1 year with Gilbert on the beat there? And is there a fond memory you have of, getting to work with Gilbert?
Well, what I remember about Gilbert when he came in, he kind of played it kind of played it cool. He didn't, a new guy on the beat, didn't want to kind of overstep his bounds. And in the media room at the Rams, there was a front row seat right next to me. And for several weeks, Gilbert was kind of sitting in the back, more of the, towards the back of the room. And I finally said, "Hey, come on, man, you're the guy. You're asking great questions. You got to ask them from right here in the front row." And Gilbert stepped up and did a great job and really lent himself to, you have to understand, on a beat, we're all competitive. We all want to be the first. But you also, there is a camaraderie there because, you're trying to get the news and different things. And Gilbert was a great addition. We were sad to see him go when he took the new job, but it was a great step for him, and we miss him to this day.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, sorry, Gilbert. I was gonna say I noticed that the connection that you guys have as a beat during training camp last year. Everybody was coming over to Gilbert and telling him that. So I just wanted to make sure I asked you about that. Go ahead, Gilbert. Sorry.
Yeah, you're gonna make me blush here, Gary. But yeah, that was pretty cool of you to do because I was trying to be the cool kid, again, getting cool haircuts and trying to sit in the back, being the cool guy. But I think you did, kind of read me for a bit. Like, you know what? I didn't want to overstep. You've been there for a long time. Obviously, Jordan has been there for a few years too. And, it's kind of like with Jim Hill. When you see Jim Hill, he asked the first question in LA. Right. And it's like, well, I know Gary Klein. I've been reading his work from his USC football days. And obviously we, working at Rival Papers, I'm like, I didn't know how to play it out. I've been at other places where, people are a little, hey, get away from me, new kid. You're not on my level, kid. We're competitive here. But I do appreciate, Gary, that you found the balance to keep it competitive. We're all professionals, but hey, it's okay. Be up. You earned that spot up there. That's right. I took it, and you reminded me, so I appreciate that, Gary.
Yeah. All right, Gary. Now for some football. Now I got to ask, the hard-hitting questions here before Gilbert gets in here again. But the Rams are coming off a playoff, a playoff season, and they lose Aaron Donald at the beginning, right before the offseason begins, and now they're having to construct this roster. Have they done enough, in your view, to fill some of the position needs, whether it's been in free agency and now in the draft?
Well, that remains to be seen, right? Until they really start playing. But they were obviously very active in the draft, not so much in free agency, but I think in the draft, in terms of especially that defensive front, with the absence of Aaron Donald. Of course, we all know, they're not going to replace him with one person. And even if they tried, that person is not going to be able to replace, arguably one of the best defensive linemen in the history of the NFL. But I think that the Rams, with the way they drafted, they're attempting to address it. And, with a first round pick, getting an edge rusher, a second round pick, getting a tackle, and then getting two more, defensive linemen, you can't fault them for lack of trying. So I think they really did that. For fans, they went out and got a kicker and for them, but really, I mean, to kind of quiet some of the screaming that you could hear even from outside SoFi Stadium, they drafted a kicker in free agency, bringing back Darius Williams and Tre'Davious White, bringing in Tre'Davious White. They've addressed some stuff at corner. So I think they got to feel pretty good about going into the season, at least with, having some framework of how they might do this, especially on defense, with a new defensive coordinator in Chris Shula.
Yeah, Gary, and that takes me to my next question, and it has to do with Chris Shula. I mean, no Aaron Donald. You see Raheem Morris move on. What is a good expectation for fans to have with Chris Shula, in his rookie season as defensive coordinator?
Well, I think it's going to range, right? I mean, he's been around Sean McVay, forever, since college, since they were college teammates. He's been around some great defensive coordinators, and Wade Phillips, Raheem Morris, Brandon Staley. He has been there through the evolution of that defense. And I will say, in his introductory news conference, he wasn't just a guy who'd been an assistant coach. He didn't come off as just, hey, I'm a longtime assistant, I'm taking over. He really commanded that news conference, I thought. And appeared to be someone who's ready to take on this responsibility. Now, when it gets into the heat of the moment, he's got to make those in-game decisions and game planning and stuff. We'll have a better idea. But I think going in, fans shouldn't be worried about necessarily what he's doing. But it remains to be seen if he and his assistants can get that defense playing at a level that is going to equal or better, what that offense should be.
Yeah, Gary, a lot of good players now for Chris Schiller to take over in year one as a DC. Been around like a long time, like you mentioned, Gary. But let me ask you two questions here with the first two picks. I'll start with Jared Verse, the first round pick out of Florida State, and actually his teammate Braden Fisk too. But Jared Verse, to stick with him, they got Byron Young in the third round last year. He played pretty well. I want to say almost double-digit sacks there. They're building that front with I think you asked a question too after the draft was over. 4 out of your 6 picks are on the defensive front. So and also they got Kobe Turner and they got Byron Young. But what was it about Jared Verse that they really liked that number 19? Because like you mentioned, they could have traded out, they could have traded up. So something tells me they kind of felt good about the board. Hey, we like this guy. It could be Jared Verse. Maybe they wanted to get Latu or maybe a Dallas Turner, but they just weren't there. And Jared Verse was still good for them. What did they like about Verse? And probably like a two-parter. I'm asking a lot of questions here, Gary. One thing I know that you enjoy, and I enjoy myself as a former beat reporter, is getting to know their backgrounds, where they came from, what made them become a football player, that they play different sports. So, for the two-parter, what did they like about Jared Verse, the football player? And then the second part, what did they like about Jared Verse, the player off the field?
Well, I think what they like about him on the field is good size, great athleticism, and the other thing is what they saw on tape. I mean, no matter, we go through the whole draft season, right? Mock drafts. What's this prospect? Who's that prospect? When it comes down to it, these coaches, these GMs, they rely on what they see on game tape. And they Florida State had a great season. We kind of forget about them because they got shut out of the college football playoff, but they had a great team. And I think they saw his production, they saw his athleticism. And I think what they see off the field or maybe in the background, and this is actually consistent not only with Verse, but with Fisk and going back to Kobe Turner and even Byron Young. These are all guys that started at small colleges. They started their careers at small colleges and they finished them because they wanted that challenge of going to a bigger school and proving that they were NFL worthy. And all 4 of those guys did that. And I think Verse, and Fisk, just the latest, there's something to be said for those kinds of players. Of course, he may not be that freak, top 5 pick, but you've got, when you combine, what his physical skills are with what he has shown, I think mentally in terms of just making that journey and making himself into a prospect. I think that that adds to the Rams feel that this is a guy with a similar kind of attitude with the guys that we've got, our young guys now, and that he's going to fit in, and that they're ostensibly they're going to give him more skills to help him really succeed.
That's a really good point, Gary. Because I was telling Victor, I'm like, they've invested a lot in the defensive front. They planned ahead for Aaron Donald last year with Kobe Turner and Byron Young, and they got those guys right. They invested more capital this year. And then the theme that you mentioned, small schools, they might not be a superstar, but they're going to work hard. They're going to, know their assignments. They're going to be in the right spots. And what's the best way to replace Aaron Donald? Having 4 or 5 guys who are really, really good. They might not be legendary Hall of Famers, but really, really good players. So that's a good point by you, Gary. Now, going over to Braden Fisk, the teammate of Jared Verse of Florida State, I was curious about them going up from number 52 to 39, and they gave up a 2025 second-round pick. That's a high price to pay for a player. So that tells me they really like the kid. But again, why was it worth for them to go up and get the football player? And also, what did they like about Fisk as a off-the-field player?
Well, as I mentioned, I think he's traveled not the same road, but a similar kind of road as Verse, right? Started at Western Michigan, played there forever, and then decided, I'm moving up, I'm going to test myself. And I think what made him, more attractive to the Rams and maybe, or enabled them to make that kind of move is, they've played together. Verse and Fisk obviously have played together. And if you listen to them after they were drafted, they're like bonded in terms of their work ethic. So I think what the Rams maybe were looking at with him still on the board is like, hey, that's not going to be any kind of transition that we're going to have to wait for. They know how to play together. They haven't played in our system, but they're on the same wavelength already. And so I think, that lent itself to the Rams making that move. Now, as you mentioned, I mean, that was kind of a steep price to pay for, moving up. But the Rams feel confident, and we'll see how this all plays out. The other thing that I would add is just, and Gilbert, you saw it when you covered the Rams. You've seen it from afar, just covering the league. Aaron Donald makes everyone better. I mean, Kobe Turner had a great rookie season. Byron Young had a great rookie season, and not to take anything away from what they achieved, but they were playing with Aaron Donald, and now they're not. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact, that has on their performances. It may actually free them up to, show even more of their skill set. But without Aaron Donald in there, even though they say there's no pressure on these guys and they want them just to be themselves, there's going to be pressure on them to help fill that void.
Yeah, and I, hearing you say that, it reminded me. I think it was a quote from Great Gaines a couple years ago when Aaron Donald went down, and he's like, "Well, what's different?" He's like, "Well, I have to wait for him to set up, the block, to get penetration, and now it's like now I'm doing a different thing. I'm actually allowed to rush the passer, so it's kind of different. So now with Kobe Turner, he's gonna be allowed to do those things. But I wanted to ask you, the next thing I wanted to ask you was, we kind of talked about, some of the surprises like Blake Corum, and then you also had Cameron Kitchens, the safety, because those are two positions they've already taken care of. We talked about in the offseason, but was there any surprise for you with either Blake Corum or even Cameron Kitchens, who they drafted in the third round there?
I would say, I was a little bit surprised that they went for a running back, in the third round. But I also think that, the Rams are looking beyond this season too. I mean, and, Kyron Williams had a great season last year, but they need another productive back. And I think Corum is a guy that showed he's durable, and he'd be a great complement. He comes from a winning program. Again, they're adding to their culture there. So on that level, it wasn't a surprise. I mean, I think the days of, drafting a running back in the first round anymore are largely gone, right? I mean, just the way the league has gone, running backs to even get a second contract with the team that they're on is difficult. So I think the Rams are looking ahead. I think he strikes me as on the limited exposure I've had to him in interviews and stuff, he seems like a great fit from a culture standpoint. And then Kitchens, I think, the Rams do, without Jordan Fuller, they lost some leadership and some playmaking, although he wasn't, a real, a spectacular guy in terms of getting turnovers, but he was a solid leader and really ran the defense back there. I think Kitchens is a guy, at least if you look at his production at Miami, is someone who covers that field and can create turnovers. And I think the Rams, are looking for a little bit more of that out of their defensive backfield. So that's why I think they went out and got him.
Yeah, now you have two Cams and two Kobe's in the defense. So, just in terms of the day three, you talked about the kicker Cardi. Was there anybody else that kind of stands out as somebody who, we know what happened last year with Puka Nacua. He was drafted, in day three as well. Is there somebody that kind of people, Ram fans should keep an eye on?
Well, I think all of them are worth keeping an eye on, just because the Rams have had pretty good success with those day three picks. I don't think it's fair to expect Jordan Whittington to do what Puka did last year, but he's a guy that can maybe find a role in the rotation with those guys. And again, I think the Rams are looking ahead to the future in terms of how that receiver core is constructed this year. He's a guy that could come in, and he seems like kind of a grinder, who stayed with it at Texas while other, more heralded people were coming in. He kind of just kept doing his job. Tyler Davis, a nose tackle, gives them another defensive lineman. As in the middle, and of course Brennan Jackson from Washington State is a local kid, from Temecula, another guy who might be able to give them some production on the edge. And then you have the two offensive linemen, Bo Limmer, who some people are calling, I've seen, the sleeper of the draft, and gives them great insurance in terms of, with Steve Avila, moving to center. Hopefully for the Rams, that works out for him and for them. But Limmer, I think, is a big prospect that's played a lot. And then Leviston, the offensive lineman from Kansas State, strikes me as probably a project. A guy who played tackle, but that they might can work as an inside guy and add depth. So, I think it was a really solid on paper draft for the Rams. Now it just remains to be seen how those guys pan out.
All right, Gary, we got two more questions for you, and we'll let you go here. One Rams related, and maybe a fun question after that. But I got to ask you about Matthew Stafford, and asking about the guaranteed money. And for me, it didn't seem too surprising because when you play that well a year ago and you got 1 year left of guaranteed money, you're gonna ask, right? You got to at least ask to get a little more money. It reminds me a little bit of the Kirk Cousins situation, where all right, Kirk, we gave you so much money, enough is enough. Go play the last year and we'll figure it out. But we saw what happened to Kirk Cousins. He had to go get his money on the market out there. To you, what do you take away from Stafford and that guaranteed money situation?
Well, I think that the fact that the Rams, addressed it on the day after, when after the draft, when that came out, they acknowledged it. He's their guy. That team isn't going anywhere, without Matthew Stafford, and they're going to do what they need to do to keep him happy. But the impression I got from Sean McVay's comments was, we know what he means to us. We're working to reciprocate, and I'm guessing that they'll work something out that keeps all parties happy.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure they'll figure it out. But Gary, I want to share a little bit of your background. And I think, we became, good friends because of our, the way we were, brought up, both Pasadena natives, and we both went to Cal State Northridge, so, we've gotten a couple of drinks out there in Pasadena too. So we get along pretty well. But Gary, I just like your background story, because a lot of people, have to kind of grind it out and to work their way up and got to hustle. I had to put in my fair share of years, but I remember you were working is it the old days at the Orange County LA Times offices? You're working your way up. You saw the UFC football opening, you took it. Then you saw the Rams coming back. That's my beat, and you took the Rams beat in 2016. I want to do this a little more, and we've talked about maybe kind of talking to younger journalists that that want to make it in this business, and eventually, hopefully, we get to do that, go to a couple of schools or colleges. But what is the best advice that you give somebody that wants to do what we do in this business of being a sports reporter?
Well, I think the main thing is there's so much, at the moment, the business obviously has been evolving and cutting back and whatnot over the last 20 years, but the fact that we're here in this medium doing this shows you that there's opportunities well beyond that were there when I started in my career, and even when you started in your career. And so I would just encourage young aspiring sports journalists to don't let people dissuade you from getting into this if you really have a passion for it, because you will find your niche. You'll find a spot, and it may not even be in the spot that you envision initially, because new opportunities are opening up all the time. And just be smart, be nimble, ask a lot of questions, not only of the people you're interviewing, but the people you're working with, so you expand your network, and you can have a really satisfying and long career.
And take that front seat of the Rams news conference, right,
That's
Gary?
right. That's
there
right.
You go. Well, Gary, we really appreciate the insight and your time. You're so gracious with your time, and I learned a lot. I think our viewers did as well. I'm sure Victor did too. So
yes,
we appreciate that, Gary. That is Gary Klein of the LA Times. He's been doing it for a long time, covering USC football, covering the Rams since 2016. Gary, we really appreciate the time.
Thanks
Gary. Very much for having me, you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. All right, Gilbert. Awesome. That was awesome of you to do. You set this up for us, so that is really cool. Let me move this. There we go. I think we got it. And then one more little thing here that I got to do.
There you go. Get it going.
There we go. And there we go. We're back to normal there. All right, Gilbert. So we're back. it was great having. Just give me your thoughts on what Gary had to say there, and going over some of the draft picks.
Honestly, going back to him saying, all the players on the defensive front coming from small schools, I totally forgot about that. Obviously, Jerry Verse went to Albany. All these players had to kind of work their way up, and having a high motor, having to prove something, and then also having the chemistry. Jared Burrs and Braden Fisk playing together, and that matters when you're going to go through a big transition year without Aaron Donald. And I kept telling you, Victor, like, how can he replace a legendary player, maybe the best defensive tackle in the entire NFL history? And they just kind of do it with guys who have work ethic. They know how to gel together. They know how to play under Chris Shula. And, to get 4 out of the first 6 picks to be on the defensive front, and you still got Ernest Jones in the back as a middle linebacker. They didn't get an inside linebacker. That's a story for another day. But
Yes.
I think the Rams played pretty well, and that was a great point by Gary.
Yeah, and I mean there was a lot that we got out of there. I mean, we kind of broke it down on what was it, Thursday and Friday with the first 2 days of the draft, but he gave us a lot more than we got into, especially with the day 3 stuff, because there was a lot there that a lot of the players that he went into was really insightful. I mean, there are some guys that going through these draft picks, Brennan Jackson, the edge out of Washington State. You have Tyler Davis, the D tackle from Clemson, Joshua Carty, the kicker from Stanford. You got Jordan Whittington from Texas, the receiver. Bulemer is the one that everybody keeps talking about. That's the guy that everybody is excited about. They think he's the guy that's going to do something, especially, depending on what happens with Steve Avila as center. So he's a good guy to have there. And KT Leviston, the offensive guard out of Kansas State as well. So there's a lot to get into. I've seen a lot of draft grades where they have the Rams as one of the winners. A lot of media pundits have really liked what they did, in terms of one of the other things that Gary talked about, and he's not the only one that's talked about this. We had Morrison on. Kirk Morrison talked to us about this. One of the things that the Rams look forward to getting in draft picks is guys who have been there a while, guys who have been starters, who've been there for 4 or 5 years at their school, or were not in college playing football. And now the little tidbit that Gary gave us there that I thought was great was these are guys that started out somewhere else, moved on to the new school, and they balled out. They proved that, hey, I belong at this level.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then I got to get to know Bo Limmer now, because if Garrett's bringing it up, you're saying you're hearing some stuff. So I got to watch the highlights of and I should, because the Rams have been pretty good with their day 3 picks there, and obviously when people really like Brennan Jackson, and it's funny because I was confused, like, did they get a linebacker or not, and because they can't figure out what the hell is an edge rusher, defensive end, or inside linebacker, off ball linebacker. There's a bunch of names, and
Yeah.
I heard Sean McVay saying, what, Tyler Davis and Braden Fisk are going to be on the inside with Kobe Turner. Now you got 3 guys right there. Jared Burrs and Brendan Jackson going to be on the edges. Obviously with Michael Hoyt and Byron Young, and just all the capital and investment and time they've taken to build that. I think the good teams, Victor, are the ones that plan ahead. They had an idea that Aaron Donald's going to either retire this year or next year or the year after. And you look at the last 2 years, they're ready to go. And, it sounds weird to say, but I don't want to say they're better without Aaron Donald. But this unit is really set up well for all the moves they did and invested on the front. Yeah, they could use another, veteran linebacker. I think that might be the last piece, Victor. Yes. But I like that they use a pick on Cameron Kitchens. You also have Quinton Lake. You got Russ Heath. You also have I'm blanking. Oh, Cam Curl, another Cam. And you got Tre'Davious White if he has a bounce back year. You got maybe Kobe. We can't forget about Kobe Durant and guys like that. They invested. So, hey, last year they didn't have talent, and it was all about Aaron Donald making it work. And they really went heavy, draft here for the defensive side, and then to go on the offensive side. A lot of pressure on the wide receiver from Texas, Jordan Whittington, because of Puka Nacua. It's kind of hard to do that again. But speaking of pressure, Joshua Carty is going to have a lot of pressure as a starter. Or if he wins that job, I'm assuming they're going to put it up.
He's going to win that job.
He's going to win it, but I would like to see him compete with a veteran, but he's probably going to win it. You're right.
Yeah, and they brought back, I think, Tanner Brown, who they had in in training camp last year. So he's going to be in a kicker battle there. But the other thing too, Gilbert, that we have to keep in mind is that we have a new kickoff rule, and so he has to get used to not just making field goals, but also being able to pinpoint the ball where they want to have it, whether either going to the end zone or somewhere in between the 20 and the 10-yard line. So there's a lot of work for a young guy like this. That's why I was kind of hoping they'd wait and but I understand the move here. He was the best kicker. It was either him or the kid out of Alabama. They got, the Stanford kid. So let's see what happens. But at least now, and one of the things we've talked about is, you kind of feel it for rookie kickers, because we've seen what happens. It's hard for them, especially when you're going to a pressure packed kind of situation with the Rams, where they're expecting to make the playoffs again. And so if he
Yeah.
starts missing some kicks, they're gonna, there's not gonna be a lot. It'll be interesting to see if there's gonna be a leash for him, but I doubt it, just because we know how important field goals are for this, especially under Sean McVay.
Yeah, it's always very nerve wracking, but it's funny because I just watched the clip of Joshua Carty getting the phone call from the Rams about about being drafted, and Sean McVay picks up the phone. He's like, "Hey, you're ready to kick extra points?" Because obviously they don't want to put him in a pressure situation with field goals as a rookie. So if this offense explosive and they're scoring a lot of touchdowns, and you have to worry about the field goals, and it could work out, but it's going to be a very dicey situation if Joshua Carty is being asked to win games at the end. But Victor, maybe that's a good transition for me to
Yep.
unleash here the Puka Nakua keywords for the jersey giveaway. And we're so excited because we're getting closer to 1,000 subscribers here on House of Horns. Maybe that Gary interview is going to help us get closer. We're going to cut out the clip sometime this week to watch it fully for the Gary Klein. And again, shout out to Gary Klein for helping us out. He's been doing this for a long time, one of the best in the business. Rams beat reporter. You probably hear his voice all the time for Rams press conferences, but yeah, we'll put that out there on House of Horns and help us get to 1,000 subscribers. And again, we're gonna give away a Puka Nakua jersey when we get to 1,000. So you know the rules by now. You could get a raffle ticket. When we give the keywords right here, which is Cardi for the win. Maybe get ready for that Cardi for the win. You got to speak it into existence for the future. Get ready for that.
Yes.
So type in here in the live chat if you're watching live, Cardi for the win, or you're watching on the replay, just comment Cardi for the win, and I will track that, and you're automatically in for the Puka Nakua jersey giveaway. Some people have 20 to 40 entries. That's a better advantage to get this jersey. When we get to 1,000 in a week, 2 weeks, I don't know, but we're getting pretty close. So type in the keywords, and then you want an extra entry, like another raffle ticket, send me an email with the time that we revealed the Cardi for the win keywords. Give me your first and last name, and also give me, there you go, Fred on top of it. And yeah, send me an email at Gilberto at compasonthebeat.com, Gilbert with an O at compasonthebeat.com. There's an email right there. The time, the keywords, your name, and also your YouTube name. That way I could track it. And when it's time to get to 1,000, I'm gonna put everything on the board. We're gonna do a little giveaway, hopefully soon, Vic.
Yeah, and shout out to everybody, because everybody's been pushing for the 1,000 subscribers. So we thank everybody who's been from day one. I mean, it seems good. Like within the last 6 months, once the Rams went on their playoff run when they were 3-6, from that point on till now, it's just been kicking in high gear. We've been able to get a bunch of subscribers, so we appreciate that. People are loving the content, so be a friend, tell a friend, and we want to give away this Puka Nakua jersey as soon as possible. And hopefully we can do it, Gilbert. We were talking about this. We can give it away during our show for the Rams schedule release. So
Yeah,
show that we'll do. So hopefully
yeah,
by then we're what, like, I think last I saw we were at 957. So
yeah,
it looks like we need about, if my math is right, around 43 more. So
yeah.
let's
Maybe
get
by the
to
time we
it.
log off here is a little more. Maybe we're past 960. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. So, shout out to everybody. But Gilbert, just going off of that, just to kind of conclude here with the draft class, and we'll move on, to the comments here that we've been getting. So if you have any comments, any questions you have, send them our way. I'll get them on here soon enough. But just in terms of we talked about day one, we talked about day two. We had a show, so if you haven't, checked it out, go back and we gave our thoughts on the first and second day. But just in terms of the third day, we talked about the kicker. Was there somebody that kind of what was your takeaway from the day three, and then was there a player that you were like, okay, that's a position I like that. I can see that player kind of growing with this team.
Honestly, I'm gonna put up this comment here from Manuel Brennan Jackson for them to double dip at edge rusher, and obviously, you go through your day one, your day two. So to start day five with Brennan Jackson, when you already got Jared Verse as your first round pick, you already have Byron Young, you already have Michael Hoyt. That tells me they really like the kid out of Washington State here. So maybe it could be somebody. And Manuel, you could let me know, but I don't know if Brennan Jackson was on your list, the last couple of weeks because you had a long list of players to watch out for. Maybe he's one of
Yeah.
your guys here. But hey, I got to do my research more on Brandon Jackson because to start day three and then you already had an edge rusher, you got a few last year. That tells me they saw something in the kid there, and maybe his upside potential to be a starter, or maybe he's a really good player as a rotational piece. Because again, you can't replace Aaron Donald with one player. You need to have a very good defensive front to make it work as a collective unit. So to me, I want to keep an eye on Brandon Jackson.
Yeah, and just the way the draft went, I was really impressed. As I told you, Gilbert, one of the things that I've been looking at just from the grades, and I don't like to pay attention a lot. I like paying more attention not to the actual grade, but just the breakdown of the players. Just because I'm always honest about this. I don't pay attention to college football year round. Like I've been paying attention to pretty much every sport. So if when I watch college football, it's during the playoff time. That's when the playoffs are it kind of slows down after week 17 and week 18, and with the Rams, it was kind of hard for us to kind of focus on college when they were making a playoff run. But just reading and actually listening to people who do this 24/7 for college football, the way they broke down this class, they were really impressed with what the Rams did. And that's all I can go off of, Gilbert, because I mean,
Yeah.
just seeing like and the Nuggets too, the whole thing about these are guys who have been at school, playing football for 4 to 5 years, and that's one of the trademarks of this Rams team. They go for those kind of players. And then now the little nugget that Gary just gave us, it's guys who started somewhere else, went to a big school, and then dominated there as well. So I mean, it was on needs, honestly. Whether it was the offensive line, defensive line, and then kind of taking a shot with on the upside of a safety, and a running back. I mean, we've talked about the Blake Corum thing, and the more we'll get into it as we go on about the signing of Boston Scott. One thing I've learned with the Shanahan offense and the McVay is that their players, whether their offensive skill players, are going to get hurt because the way they run their offenses, they put them in tough positions where they get hurt. And so you need to have backup guys, and that just means that Zach Evans is probably seen his last days as a Ram.
Yeah, and who knows about Ronnie Rivers? Because you go from
That's another
You
one.
got Blake Corum, and you also got Kyron Williams, who I think is going to be a very dominant 1-2 punch right there. They're probably going to take most of the carries, and like you mentioned, Zach Evans, you got Ronnie Rivers, and you get so if you add a Boston Scott, you're feeling like okay, now you need a veteran piece, and that's maybe the three-man rotation right there. So I really like Ronnie Rivers. I know he wasn't the most talented. He wasn't going to get you 100 yards rushing, but it's going to be a guy who just, gives you all he has, good effort
Yeah.
and move the chains. And maybe he'll be a very solid special teams core player. Who knows? You need guys like that too. But Victor, I know we're out of order today, but I think it might be a good time to bring up the engagement question because you brought up the
Yep.
grades in your point right here. So I
Yeah.
ask you, the listeners and viewers of House of Horns, what would you grade the Rams draft class for 2024. We saw a lot of B's and A's out there for the media. I'm messing my computer here. But yeah, what's the grade for the Rams 2024 draft class? And to me, I give it, I know I already mentioned before, but I give it a solid B plus. Again, I think I focused too much on the first two rounds because hey, maybe you get a lot to, maybe you get a Byron Murphy, Going up from 52 to 39, a little steep, for me to lose that 2025 second round pick. But if you like Braden Fisk like they did, go ahead and get the guy. But hey, the other point too is the tackles. They didn't really get one early on, but they got a couple in the back end. Is it Glimmer or Limmer? I got to remember the name too.
Limmer.
Limmer. Maybe it should be an A because people like the kid there.
Yeah.
They did address needs on the offensive line, but a little too late for me. And then again, they never got an inside linebacker. They got a couple outside linebackers, but not an inside linebacker. And I think that's where people freak out the most. So to me, I'll give it a B plus.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, everybody, like I said, it's either a B or an A, and I think I like B plus there just because one of the biggest points I saw somebody make was all the guys they drafted could be potential starters. I mean, go down the line, they could all be starters, eventually, during their rookie contract. So that's what you want to see. And then in terms of Jordan Whittington, that's a special teams guy. You know how we talked about picking up guys to help out with special teams? That guy is a perfect gunner that you can use, on punt returns and also on, well, now with the kickoff, it changes things. But like every single draft pick had a purpose, and that's the kind of thing that you want to see. I mean, I'm not just, like I said, this is all I've read, this is all I've heard from other people, and so that's where I'm basing it off of. So I mean, it was a really good and productive draft. Now we got to see it. Now
Yeah.
can it be, seen on Sundays, and will that translate, Gilbert? And I think that's the biggest question mark.
Yeah, a quick promo. I'm writing stories again for Sports Illustrated officially. So, they asked me to rank from 1 through 16, one being the best draft classes in the NFC. And I don't want to give it away, but the Rams are ranked pretty high, and that's saying a lot because they have to compete with the Bears, who had a very good draft class, compete with the Eagles, who had a very good draft class. I really like what the Lions did. I like what the Cardinals did. So, that tells you the Rams are up there. At least for me, they did something right. Again, it's not an A, but a B plus is pretty damn close. So I liked it.
Yeah, and I'm with you. We'll see what happens, but in terms of this draft class, I really like. Before we get to just the comments here from people, just to close out the show, Gilbert, I just wanted to ask you. I know we haven't gotten into it. I know the Worm brought it up. We didn't see it when it first popped up, but the Matthew Stafford, we talked
Yeah.
about it a little bit with Gary, but just your overall thoughts. For me, it's a non-story. I went back and kind of did a little bit of researches in terms of the contract, and it just sounds like, just to give people a heads up. We talked about it a little bit in terms of what it is, but Matthew Stafford has the fourth highest cap hit that going into the 2024 season, Gilbert, at 49.5 million, and he has a base salary of 31 million this season. So pretty much he's got no guarantee money after this season, Gilbert. So one of the things that I have a little theory in terms of why he's asking for the money, and it happened on draft night, was because once he saw those six quarterbacks go in the first 12 picks, he knew he had leverage on the Rams, and he's like, I'm gonna play my card here, and I want my guaranteed money now. And
Yeah.
so, which is smart of him. And
Yep.
as Gary brought it up, it's a non-story. He's in camp. He's been in voluntary, whatever it is, camp.
Yeah.
But it just shows you that this was just Matthew Stafford playing his hand and asking for more guarantee money.
Yeah, and obviously it's obvious that he needs more money, and the way he played last year, like a top 8 quarterback in the NFL, and the way these NFL players are making money, Kirk Cousins is making bank every single year. You have to at least ask, and you put the pressure on the franchise saying, "Hey, pay me more money. You can't treat me like Kirk Cousins because I've won playoff games. I brought you a freaking Super Bowl in 2021. I play like a top 8 quarterback. I'm saying top 8 because I think that's maybe the lowest from last year. You play great, lights out. So,
Yeah,
you decide where you want to rank them, but it's definitely in the top 8, top 10. So you got to ask. Now, here's the beauty, like you mentioned, Victor. It was great timing during the draft.
yeah,
Okay, I don't. Nobody drafted my replacement. That was the Falcons with Kirk Cousins. Nobody drafted Michael Penix Jr. Nobody drafted Bo Nix, and they were off the board before the Rams even thought about it. So it's not even awkward or anything like that. but you make it awkward for the Rams because, hey, what are you going to do? Now the ball's in
Yeah.
your court. I've done everything I've been asked for. I had, the year before that in 2022, had some bad concussions, a bad spinal cord injury, and I came back and I balled out. Now the ball is in your court. So it's a beautiful tactic from his agent and his camp there. And I think you got to pay the guy. He proved last year that he has, maybe 2 to 3 years left. You don't have a replacement just yet. So, obviously they got Jimmy G, but it's not going to be
Yeah, no.
the heir apparent right there.
That was also
But
weird. Have you seen the video of both of them throwing at this? It was just weird. Like,
I know rivals for so long,
I know exactly.
NFC West, but it was just great timing. And like again, like you can't give Stafford the Kirk Cousins treatment because the Vikings after a while they kept paying the guy guaranteed money every two to. It was great, great to Kirk Cousins' agent. Like, hey, short term deals, and you ask again after 2 years, and you get paid. But after a while, the Vikings were like, yeah, no more, man. You haven't won in the playoffs. F that. We're gonna go into the season you being a lame duck, and for the most part, it wasn't awkward. So if you're the Rams, the Vikings and Kirk Cousins, Kirk Cousins played well before the Achilles injury, but again, Stafford's not Kirk Cousins. You got to take care of the guy, and you add pressure. Yeah, he's older. He has his own injury concerns, but he played lights out last year and he won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and as Fred says here, he says he wasn't asking for more money. He just wants guarantee for the following year, and
He wants
yeah,
insurance. Yeah,
it's insurance. I mean, he just wants to have his money, and I don't blame the guy, as we talked about. And then the last little thing before we get to everybody's comments here, Gilbert, is Boston Scott signing a 1 year deal. We talked about the running back position, the last couple of minutes there, but I think where he kind of fits into. Remember, we talked about special teams guy. He's a special teams guy. Remember how I said you're gonna want to use some of your running backs to return kickoffs. Well, there's your guy now. That takes care of that issue for you, and so he'll be a kickoff return specialist for them, but also be the third running back in that running back room.
yeah. No, that's probably more the reason why he's with the Rams now because of special teams, a veteran player. Hey, you never know, injuries could happen. The running back is a physical position, so yeah, that's a great point by you. Him being a special teams player too.
And to Willie Bowen's point as well, the LA Rams need a power running back for the red zone and goal line scoring. I think they could use Boston Scott in
Yeah.
those fourth and one, third and one kind of situations if they need a power back. But let's get to these comments, Gilbert. We really like having this feedback. It's been a great show so far. I mean, we had Gary Klein. I asked you, Gilbert. I said I have two requests for the next week, and you said, well, I might be going on a trip. So I said, hey, all I ask is if you can give me a B reporter because I really want to make sure that we try to get to 1,000 subscribers. And you came through, and then we had a show. That was the other request, and so that's awesome. So I just wanted to give you a shout out here because you came through for
Yeah.
us here, and as
Hey,
we go
it
ahead.
all worked. It all worked out, Victor. Well, you're gonna let me go soon because I need to have dinner. But
Yeah,
before we jumped on for this live with Gary Klein, I was at a jet ski for the first time at the river right here in Laughlin, Nevada, and yeah, I didn't do too well. Luckily, my partner Caroline, she knows how to, I guess maneuver the jet ski. But to me, I was pretty afraid out there. But hey,
yeah,
I took a chance there, and getting Gary on, me being on the jet ski, but it wasn't taking a chance with Gary. Gary is awesome. He was
yes,
gracious with his time, and we learned a lot. And do us a favor, people here, supporting us at House of Horns. And when you see the clip out video on the channel, smash the like button, comment
yeah.
it, let it, blow up in views. And when people watch the video more, it goes out to the algorithm, and we get more subscribers out of it. Maybe we'll get 1,000 because of Gary. So we'll definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, and then I can put the pressure on Gilbert to get us more guests on. So that'll be another thing to kind of keep in. That would also help. But Gilbert, let's get to these comments real quick because you need to get back to your vacation here. We got Gilbert Ruiz. He says Rams house. What's up, Gilbert? Your
Tocayo.
tocayo. Delver Salgado says appreciate the insight on Chris
Yeah.
Shula. Looking forward to his success. So
I
that's
think
really
Delver's been asking a lot about Chris Shula, so
so
he
like
finally got some good
yeah,
information
and
there.
I've been thinking about that too. I'm like, we don't know. Like that's why I said, what is the reasonable expectation for Chris Shula? Like and everybody, whether even Fernando, our compa, was talking about some of the people he's talked to. They said they're really impressed with Chris Shula. They think that he's gonna do really well. And so for me, that'll be one of my questions going into training camp and into the season is what is a reasonable expectation to have of Chris Shula in his first season as defensive coordinator. Are Ram fans going to be patient because we saw with Raheem Morris, people really wanted him to be more aggressive, with the
Yeah.
players that he had from Brandon Staley.
Hey, when you got more edge rushers like they did in this draft, it lets you be a little more aggressive when it comes to blitzes and obvious passing situations. And my last point here in Chris Shula, like just the reminder that I got from Gary, like this guy's been around for a long time. And then when he finally talked to reporters as a new DC, he talked like he owned the room. Like I belong here. Like this is what I'm gonna do. I've been built for this. And to work his way up. Hey, I think for me, if you're a Rams fan, you should feel confident about what Gary said about him being confident in himself.
All right, let's continue on. I agree with you there, Gilbert. I mean, Edwin Rampage says, "Thank you for your time. Go Rams." I think he was talking about
Yeah.
Gary Klein when he joined us. So as he
Shout
was
out to
leaving,
Edwin.
shout out Edwin. Justin Time says, "I think if Braden Fisk becomes a solid player this year or next, the Rams should have a solid line." I mean, they're building quite the line there, Gilbert.
Yeah. And real quick, Victor, I know we've been going back and forth between Brandon and Braden. For a second, I thought I got it wrong when I was telling you, hey, it's Braden, because Sean McVay is saying, yeah, you got Braden and you got Brennan. I'm like, Brennan? I thought his name was Braden because they got a Brennan
Right.
Jackson
Yeah.
later. So Braden, Brennan, multiple Cams, multiple Kobe's. It's all confusing.
Yeah, and keeping up here with the comments. This is Fred Yamayo says he gives it an A. They solidified the defense and added another offensive weapon and addressed the kicker. I think that was one of the biggest thing was the kicker situation. I think was big for a lot of fans.
Yeah, we were wondering they're going to draft one, and they did, and we'll see what Cardi does. Cardi for the win.
Yeah, Gilbert Ruiz is back. He gives it a B plus for
I
the
like
draft
it.
class. Michael Armenta says, "What's up, fellas? What's going on, Michael?"
So, Michael.
Fred, he wasn't asking. Well, we already went through this one. My bad. We already did the Willie Bowen one. Michael says, "I'm satisfied with who the Rams drafted. They all look promising." James Wheelock says he just wants to know if the Rams are committed to him past
Yeah.
2024. It tells me he still has a lot of gas in the tank yet. So
Yeah, just to go back, maybe I phrased it wrong with getting more money. He wants more security. That's definitely the right term to say. But the thing is, like, it puts pressure on the Rams because, like, hey, maybe you could free up. Stafford could be like, hey, you could free up some cap space right now if you give me my money up front, some signing bonus. It's just the problem is you commit now to another year and you don't have that flexibility. But I don't think that's an issue because again, Stafford played great last year. He's not Kirk Cousins. He should be compensated for that.
yeah, and they're building the offense around him. I mean, they brought in all these offensive line players to help them stay
Yeah.
healthy, and then they're adding to the running back room because they want to run the ball more to protect him as well. So everything's set up for him, to continue his career here with the Rams. So I don't blame him. Like I said, he played his card. Good for him. Now get a little bit more security as you rightfully should. Um, Delbert Salgado says, "Can't wait for the top competition in camp. The cream will rise. Other teams will pick up whoever we cut." That's a good. That's a
That's
good. That's a good
yeah.
outlook.
You want to be in that place, right? And
Yeah,
people want your players.
yeah. James Wheelock says, "If you have cover corners, they can cover. You can be more aggressive."
Exactly.
And because they don't have Aaron Ronald to put the pressure on, I think that's part of the reason why they went out and took care of the secondary in free agency and in the draft. And then lastly, here says Gilbert says, "Great show. You guys are doing a great job, my brother." So thank
Thank you,
you.
sir.
We really appreciate it. It's been a great show, Gilbert. Thank you. Like I said, shout out to you for getting Gary Klein on. We're trying to do a little bit more of this, especially during the off season.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys like what we have to say in terms of how we break down. Gilbert is a staff writer at Sports Illustrated, so he's got the whole NFL covered. I wanted to get a perspective of a beat writer, and Gary Klein has, he gave us more than we asked for in terms of all his knowledge and insight. That was really awesome. So, as Gilbert said earlier, please, I'm gonna go ahead and cut that out and cut the video out, and I'm gonna put it up. So go ahead and show it some love. Hit the likes.
Yeah.
Uh, tell be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe.
Yeah, I know that I'm not a beat reporter anymore. It's my former job. I'm now on the national side of it, so I cover a little bit of every team, all 32. So, I know what beat reporters go through covering one specific team. They know everything. So, like, obviously, I try to be the expert here, but Gary knows everything about the Rams, so I'm happy that I got him on there. I appreciate the shout out, Delbert. Delbert says, "Good show, fellas. Keep up the great work. Puro cuernos." You gotta make that into a tequila, Delbert. Puro cuernos. I actually like that name right there. But yeah, going back to Gary, he knows everything about the team. He is the only beat reporter who has covered the Rams since 2016 when they moved back. So he is definitely the guy to know. And before we leave, Victor, one more promo. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the newsletter for Compas on the Beat. We talk plenty of Rams on there. Victor's been writing about the Rams a lot. So go to compasonthebeat.com. And then when you see the shiny gold box appear on the home screen, just type in your email and you're going to be automatically subscribed to the Compass on the Beat newsletter. We would definitely appreciate the love there. Many of you have already done that, but if you haven't, please go to compassonthebeat.com, find the shiny gold box, and type in your email. You're automatically subscribing to the Compass on the Beat newsletter.
Yeah, one last comment here, James. Yeah, just I'll cut this out tonight, and I'll try to get it out as soon as possible, so that way you guys can go and watch it, because he gave us a lot of insight, some stories to do with Gilbert as well when he was covering the Rams a couple years ago as well. So make sure you check that out. But yeah, a great show, Gilbert. Thank you for your time. I know you're out having your vacation. I'm trying to get us out of here within an hour or so. But shout out to the, all the viewers and listeners. It's been awesome. People are very patient in terms of getting their comments in, and while we interviewed Gary, and he was gracious with his time as well. So I just want to keep saying that thanks to Gary Klein for joining us today.
Yeah, no, definitely great show. Shout out to Gary and shout out to everybody in the live comments here. So we really appreciate that. And yeah, time to get going, Victor.
Yeah, it's time to close this out. I think the next show that we'll have on is the one, we're kind of going off of the schedule from last year in terms of when the NFL is going to release the schedule for, the upcoming season. It'll either be, what do we say, the 16 or the
The ninth.
11th, the ninth or the
It,
16th.
it depends if they're going to keep it to the Thursday, but yeah.
Yeah, because last year it was on the 11th. It was on Thursday, May 11th. So if they release a schedule, the NFL does, it's either going to be Thursday. If they keep it the same as they did last year, it's either going to be, as we said, the Thursday, May 9th, or it'll be Thursday, May 16th.
Yeah.
If that change,
If we don't hear like a news release by tomorrow, May 2nd on a Thursday, or 1 week away, it's going to be 2 weeks later. So I'm hoping that's the case. So I don't want to do it next week.
yeah, especially with Mother's
Yeah.
Day weekend coming
Let's
up,
get
I'm
past
sure.
that Mexican Mother's Day, and
Yeah.
then we can have the schedule released.
Exactly. So, um, I'll talk to Gilbert and see when we can get him on. He's got the Canelo fight to go cover. He's got a lot on his plate. So if we can get back on, and we see that we're closer to the subs. If we get to 1,000, then we got to come back on, Gilbert. So
Yeah.
we'll be back sooner than rather than later. But I think the next target date for us to have a show is right after the NFL schedule release day. So just stay locked. And Evan has said, joined us, Victor Gilberto, woot woot. You guys rock. So thank
Shout
you,
out to
Evan.
Evan.
He's been he'll email us, and we love his feedback as well. But Gilbert, let's we've talked. We did 3 shows on the draft. We got Gary Klein. It's been awesome. But you need to go and enjoy your vacation now. So thank you so much, sir. But
All
go
right.
ahead and close us out.
Yeah. No, thank you for being on here, Victor. Obviously, we appreciate your time as well. But on that note, it's time to get going because, I'm a little sore from the jet skis, but I got to go gamble a little bit here. So, and eat. But on that note, ya nos vamos, pues, vámonos.